morning, everyone. So as we were just hearing, we're from Teesside University, which has been made famous this morning because we had an earthquake. So measured 2.8 on the Richter scale, and we've missed it. We were down here. So hopefully you will find what we're about to say interesting. To start with, I'll just take you through what we've been doing at the university and a bit of context for those that don't know, and then we'll just talk about how we think we've done it. But it is fair to say that we are on a journey, and we've still got a lot to do and a lot to learn, and it's great to talk to colleagues about other strategies that people have taken and learn together. So we came here last year and we talked a little bit about our use of Microsoft Teams. We were an early adopter of Teams, and we've introduced that institutional-wide. We have probably one of the largest managed student devices schemes going on in the UK at the minute. We provide all of our students and all of our staff with iPads. But what we actually did was we embedded a number of different pieces of software onto the iPads, and Teams was really at the centre of that. As part of that, we were really, really conscious that what we were doing was a learning and teaching project, and that actually the technology would take care of itself. And it's easy for me to say that because I'm a learning and teaching person as opposed to a director of IT. But I knew that they would sort that out and that would take care of itself. What is the harder part, and we'll go on to talk about with any digital development or big strategic transformation, is the people and changing the culture. And again, we'll cover some of that. But we were really conscious that in order to change the culture, that we needed to make sure that people felt comfortable and that they had the right skill levels. So we put all of the staff in the university through a mandatory staff development program, a digital development program. It was one of the first times the institution has done any staff development on a kind of mandatory level, and you would expect you would get quite a lot of resistance to that. But actually what we found was quite the opposite. We found that people really welcomed it, and I think part of that was about the skill set of our trainers. It was partly about working with external organisations such as Microsoft, who helped and supported us in that space. But I think it was also how we deployed the devices as well. So many institutions will deploy new technology to staff and then at some point say, oh, you need to do some training as well. What we did was we celebrated the deployment of the devices at the same time as you did the training. So you went to the training and that's when you were given your device. So people were getting the kind of hands on a shiny new bit of kit at the same time as we were then upskilling them in terms of how to use that. And what we found in relation to that was that we got 95.5% staff satisfaction, which is, for those of us that work in higher education, will know that that's particularly high for any staff development program with academics, but particularly when it was of a mandatory nature. What we were trying to do was really focus on our learning and teaching strategy, and I'll just briefly mention this. I'm happy to pick this up and talk to people about this after the session. But we introduced something that we called future-facing learning about 4 years ago into the institution. And it was really about thinking about what the central facets were in terms of the L&T strategy, but also, whilst there are segments in this diagram, they're also obviously mutually reinforcing, and good examples of that is, for example, globally connected and digitally empowered. We use technology in order to interconnect our students on our transnational education in, say, Malaysia with our students on campus in Teesside. So these things do overlap. What we'll obviously be talking about here is around digital empowerment, both of staff and students, because we were really clear that what we felt that students needed as they begin to leave university was a whole set of skills around digital, no matter what course they were on. Very, very briefly, just in terms of our journey over the last few years, one of our first big challenges was around organisation and management and reaching out to our students. And it was very clear that we were using Outlook, but we were using Outlook in a really ineffective way. So students were given an email address that was something along the lines of t746341@tees.ac.uk. And guess what? They weren't using it. So we introduced a portal both as a way of being able to push messages out, but what was quite interesting was the tile that was used more than any other was Outlook. And they started to use the portal to access their emails. So all of a sudden we started to engage in terms of our students. We introduced an electronic module evaluation system, and because our students have got devices, our returns on those are very, very high. What we actually found when we introduced that across the whole 3 years was those students that didn't have devices, their response rates were very low. So we flipped back to paper-based for those, whilst maintaining digital for those that have got devices. We introduced Microsoft Teams in 2018. We've obviously done the staff iPad deployment, and we did that much earlier than we did the students, so that staff had got those devices, they started to get used to them, they started to be able to use those to prepare their learning and teaching materials. We've moved to online VLE. We're now starting to, and a point we'll make a little bit later, is we've started to integrate as many systems as we can into the devices themselves. So now our students get a code which they enter through their tablets to record their attendance. That then is feeding into our learner analytics, and we're just in the process of procuring our new campus VLE as well. So we've got quite a lot going on, and again, we'll talk a little bit about our journey. Very, very quickly, before I hand over to Jonathan, we just wanted to just share the case study that Microsoft did on our use of Teams, and again, it just provides a little bit more context. Some of you may well have seen this, so apologies.
How do we train and teach the next generation of graduates? You, as teachers, are the change agents, harnessing technology as a catalyst for change.
Everything we do now is digital. Students are aware of that, but it's about applying it successfully in the workplace.
We really want our students to be globally connected, and we want them to be digitally empowered.
Here at Teesside University, we're absolutely passionate about digital transformation, and it's really part of our Teesside 2020 strategy that we're rolling out over the next few years.
It was a little bit daunting being tasked with delivering a training program to 400 staff, but then it quickly became obvious that this was a real opportunity for us to do this on a scale that we don't think has been done before. Once we started putting our toolkit together, it was a very obvious choice that Teams needed to be at the heart of this, particularly the collaborative features of Office 365 and how Teams can help bring people together around all those tools.
We wanted to align the technology that our students are using in the classroom with what they will eventually use as they pursue their careers over the decades to come.
We use Teams a lot. It's the hub, it's where the conversations take place, it's where we share files, it's where we support staff as well.
I'm really excited about using Teams because it will allow us to collaborate, co-create in real time.
We've seen staff using it with other staff to manage kind of projects that they're working on. We've seen it from a meetings perspective, this opportunity to be able to communicate and collaborate from anywhere on any device. That's what Microsoft Teams can give us.
You have the external apps that you can bring in with the App Store. Now that's opened up a lot of options for us to embed other features within the Teams area. Time and time again, we have staff saying, I'm really enthused, I've had plenty of ideas that I'm going to go away with, and I'm going to use these tools.
There's going to be that range of kind of digital capability with these 400 staff, so what we're really keen to do is support absolutely everybody through this. And the opportunity that the Microsoft Educator community provides is absolutely priceless.
I think Educator is a fantastic thing to allow my students to tap into new resources, upskill myself really.
It adds a great deal to our training to be able to say to our staff that you will emerge, hopefully, with Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert status.
We believe that this project will absolutely transform the university over the years to come for the benefits of our staff, our students, and the regional and national community. Over the last 3 years, we've been on a significant journey in terms of digital transformation across Teesside University. We frame that through Microsoft's Education Transformation Framework. And the reason for that is we felt that the framework reflects the complexity of the higher education ecosystem. And what I mean by that is that all of the projects we've put in place have been very much learning and teaching projects at the forefront, guiding the strategy. But they've been underpinned by a number of other factors, which includes leadership and policy. So leadership from Pro-Vice Chancellor level downwards, policy in terms of deeply embedding within our quality framework, so that when courses go for approval and review, the course teams are challenged as to how course content and design reflects our strategic digital objectives. And perhaps significantly, the technology blueprint for the university and how our IT service works in genuine partnership with our learning and teaching colleagues across the university. Increasingly, we're beginning to move that change into how the campus itself operates as well through our campus master plan, and we'll touch on some of the latest developments on that shortly. Beyond the framework, over the last 3 years or so, we've essentially developed a set of 5 working principles. What I think the benefit of these principles is that much of what we've done is heavily contextualised to Teesside University. And it may be for colleagues in the room that you're thinking that your institutions are very different. But we're fairly certain that the principles we're going to suggest today are broadly applicable across the rest of the sector, both in the UK and internationally. So the first principle we've consistently worked at is to operate at scale. What I mean is this: when we started on our journey and we began to look at other projects, both in the UK and globally, we saw that a lot of institutional digital transformation projects had failed fairly quickly. And one of the reasons for that was that they tended to start at local levels in a faculty or a single department, and therefore they never were scaled across the whole institution. The reason for that is basically threefold. First of all, they struggled to maintain momentum over a series of years as different strategic priorities came into play at institutional level. Secondly, they were very difficult to sustain as key individuals left the faculty or department. And thirdly, it was very problematic to harness and leverage the institutional infrastructure to support the key initiatives. So what we've done at Teesside is have an expectation that this involves all staff and all students, and our advanced scheme has been at the heart of that.
So what we did with Advance is we made sure that all students had devices. And what was quite interesting about this, when we did some, people keep talking about Generation X being digitally native, but when we did some focus groups with both applicants and current students, we found that they were digitally native in terms of kind of their social worlds, but not in terms of kind of their university lives. So we were really keen to change that narrative. But as part of the focus groups, when we did that, students saw the devices as kind of leisure devices. So we actually provided a keyboard with it, which again was a really good move, because we've had very, very few of these devices have been damaged, and that's because they're wrapped in a very robust keyboard. But also as well, alongside that, and it's a point that we'll come on to in a minute, we also provided book tokens as well. So our students get £100 of the book tokens each year, and they can download books electronically to their devices, or they can have hard copy books. And I kept saying at the start of this scheme, when we started to get some stats through, that it was a bit of a mixed economy in terms of what students were doing. By the end of the year, it wasn't a mixed economy at all. A staggering 98% of students were going for hard copy books. So despite the fact that they all had a device that they could download their text to, they weren't doing that. And we're quite comfortable about that, because one of the things that we'll talk about is not to push digital in spaces that it doesn't belong. If students opt to do more traditional methods, then fine. I'm a big advocate of technology, yet I still like the romance of a hard copy book. So, there is something about the way in which we think about digital strategies that we need to be careful that what we're not doing is putting the kind of technology before what we're actually trying to do. And that comes back to it being a learning and teaching project.
And that aligns with our second principle, which is to see digital transformation as providing a set of tools rather than providing technology as such. So at the heart of what we've done is to provide all staff and students with what we call the Future-Facing Learning Toolkit, which is a set of apps deployed on all devices with Microsoft Teams at its heart and other elements of Office 365 alongside such tools as Padlet and Socrative. But none of this is mandatory, and in fact we encourage staff and students to use other apps, other items of software, and we monitor that at institutional level so that we're increasingly gathering data of what actually works at ground level and thinking through how we can apply that consistently at scale. As Mark mentioned before, we're absolutely not about trying to enforce the use of technology where it doesn't fit. So this is an example of our digital classroom. It's a professional development space for staff to experiment with new technologies. And the thing I'd just like to call out in particular is alongside every screen which is used for bring your own device is a whiteboard screen, a very traditional tool, but one which we recognise has a place within the modern university. The third principle is around championing technology, and in fact, how we've ignored that as an approach at Teesside. So very often, digital transformation initiatives regarding learning and teaching in a university focus on key staff members as champions of technology. We decided not to use that model, and that was because we felt, based on past experience, that the use of digital champions often only impacts a narrow sphere of influence, often the staff members who are in close contact with that particular champion. So we took the alternate approach of trying to turn all of our staff members into digital champions by taking them through a mandatory digital development programme. As Mark mentioned, around 620 staff have completed the programme to date, with another 80 currently progressing through it. And that's resulted in a 95.5% satisfaction rate overall, which we think is pretty remarkable, given that this development programme includes staff who are at the cutting edge of research into digital technology, alongside staff who are genuinely worried about turning on an electronic device. And through taking this approach, what we've begun to see is increasing growth of innovation at local levels, therefore viewing innovation as an output, not an input of the project. When we started our digital transformation journey, one of the things that Mark said is that we'll begin to see success when innovation occurs in ways we really didn't expect, because we haven't locked things down, because we've opened it up to staff. And we're beginning to see real innovation at local level by individual members of teaching staff.
And all I would add in that space is we have seen innovation that is people using cutting edge technology that's very, very glamorous and a bit like the VR headsets and the robots that are all out there on display. But we've also seen innovation in really quite what might be seen as, and this is quite a cruel term, but a bit more mundane, but still really, really important. A good example of that is one of our members of staff in accountancy has embedded Microsoft certification around the use of Excel. It might not seem the most glamorous thing in the world, but it wasn't happening before this. So a skill set that our students need, they were going out, and like many of us, it will say that they're competent in the use of Microsoft Office or Excel, but actually they couldn't prove that. And again, what we were really keen on is making sure that that innovation was happening across all levels. And what can also happen when you create champions is they create wonderful things in the technology space, but that can actually be off-putting to other staff as well. And that what we wanted to do was make sure that what we were doing was really going across the institution, and those people that were absolutely flying in this space, yes, they were getting support, but actually we wanted the support to go right across the institution. And I think sometimes we miss that because, going back to our earlier point around technology, we get excited by what technology can do without actually thinking about what success looks like and what we're trying to achieve.
The final principle is really overarching. It's default to open. And what we mean by that is working in very close partnership with our internal and external stakeholders. We've been really fortunate to work with partners like Microsoft, Apple and Adobe to support us on aspects of our journey. But we've also been working very closely with our staff members to understand what they're doing and what's working within the curriculum. We've been really pleased to see notable evidence of success at local level. Every semester we run a module evaluation survey, which means every single module, every single student receives an online survey, and we specifically ask a question around how the future-facing learning toolkit has been used to enhance learning. In semester 1 of this academic year, our level 3 and 4 students told us that 86% of them believed that the technology they'd been using had improved their learning on that particular module. So it's been far more successful than we imagined at a relatively early stage in the process. What we're keen to do moving forward is think more around how we can work collaboratively with our students to imagine what the digital future might look like.
Just one final point on the default to open as well, and that was an internal matter. And that was about our IT department actually actively turning off the capabilities of software. And their justification for doing that was they felt that staff might not know how to use it, students might, and that might embarrass staff. And I said, no, that's all wrong. Open it all up. Open it all up. We need to drive innovation, and that might be our students driving that, or it might be our staff. Don't make these assumptions. And it's incredible how much of the capability that we were purchasing that we weren't using because of this philosophy. So again, it's that notion of defaulting to open. The final piece is a project that we've been working on again for a number of years. We've done a lot of work tracking our student journeys and looking at gain points and pain points. And that's resulted in our student life building that's just opened this week. In fact, Chris Skidmore is officially opening it today. It would be today of all days, but I think he was in Bett yesterday. He's now opening our student life building today. And student life is about a way in which we're using both, again, the integration of physical and digital to improve our student services. So my contention was that outside of the classroom, students had to navigate our organisational structures. So if they wanted a car parking permit, that was campus services, that was over here. If it was a finance issue, well, that could be anywhere in the organisation, and students got ping-ponged around. So we've put all of our services into one building, but we've done much more than that, and we've re-engineered them so that theoretically, and we'll find out very soon, that students will never know which department a member of staff happens to be in, because that should all navigate around the student. So we've got a front of house that will be able to support the students. But behind all of that is a huge database, and we'll continue to add to that database. We've introduced a chatbot into that space as well. So we're using technology to harness and blend with the physical and people skills as well. And as I keep saying, this is a big journey that we're on, but we feel that we're getting some very good early results. Thank you.
Thank you very much.